A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the hour. More reactions trail U.S. President Donald Trump's wave of tariffs around the world. China promising more retaliations. The Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs debunks claims Nigeria is on a list of countries banned from entering into Saudi Arabia. Plus, the Swedish Crown Princess Victoria makes her first visit to Nigeria. Let's begin the world today. And thanks again for joining us. More reactions have been trailing U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement of tariffs on countries around the world, with the Trump administration on a high with a scramble of nations seeking to negotiate with the U.S. This morning, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said 70 countries have contacted the White House for how to come and negotiate. Others in the administration have downplayed market reaction to the tariffs, calling any downturn a temporary adjustment that will eventually correct itself. The S&P index opened up 3.4%. The Dow Jones rose 3.5%. The Nasdaq is 3.7% higher. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said the Trump tariffs will go into effect from tomorrow with almost all countries. But there are some exempt that are already under a 10% tariff on all imports, which took effect on April 5. The UK, Argentina, Australia, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia will not be facing the higher tariffs being experienced tomorrow. And let's look at those reactions from Asia. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Li Jiang earlier today expressed determination to counter the pressure from U.S. tariffs following the announcement by Donald Trump. Addressing a press conference, he said China will take the necessary measures to firmly safeguard its legitimate and lawful rights and interests. If the U.S. side ignores the interests of the two countries and the international community and insists on fighting a tariff war or trade war, China will fight to the end, Lin's words. China responded, the comments come as President Trump announced his plan to push for an additional 50% tariff on products imported from China after Beijing responded to the previous 54% duties imposed by the U.S. on Friday. China responded with 34% levies on U.S. imports on Sunday, fueling fears of a full-scale trade war between the world's leading economies. President Trump says he believes China will strike a deal on a possible 104% tariffs. South Korea's acting president, Han Duck-soo, said in an interview earlier today there are no plans to push back on newly imposed U.S. tariffs. He rejected a suggestion his country might band with neighboring China to fight back on those levies, saying we will not take that route. Trump has said he's spoken to Duck-soo and they will be discussing some more tomorrow. We may not be expecting tariffs to begin tomorrow, but the UK is working all the angles to avoiding a trade war with the United States. In the House of Commons today, Chancellor of the Exchequer Rachel Reeves said nothing is off the table in terms of discussions with the US over tariff measures. She said this government is clear-eyed that our response to global change cannot be to watch and wait, but instead to act decisively to take the right decisions that are in our national interest. Adding, a trade war is in nobody's interests. It is why we must remain pragmatic, cool-headed, and pursue the best deal with the United States that is in our national interest. This remains our priority. Meanwhile, the UK will be holding talks with the Indian government tomorrow in an effort to secure a trade deal. Coming to Europe, Trade Commissioner Markus Sefcovic has revealed the EU countermeasures on Trump's tariffs but prefers to negotiate with the United States.
We are in the early stages of discussions because the US views tariffs not as a tactical step, but as a corrective measure. We are fully prepared to sit at the negotiation table whenever our American partners are ready. Third, while the EU remains open to and strongly prefers negotiations. We will not wait endlessly. Until we see tangible progress, we will be working along 3 tracks: defend our interests through countermeasures, diversify our trade through new agreements, and deter harmful trade diversions. On defending via countermeasures, in response to the steel and aluminium tariffs, we received valuable feedback from our member states and 660 stakeholders. After carefully reviewing all of it, we have worked to table a robust list of countermeasures while balancing the burden across all member states. We will be sending the final list and tariff levels to them later today. The vote is set for April 9th, with the final list adopted on April 15th, and then duties on products will kick in on that day for the first set of measures, and on May 15 for the remaining ones.
Here in Nigeria, the Minister of Finance, Mr. Wale Edun, has given his assurance that the National Economic Council will assess the likely impacts of the 14% tariff on goods exported from Nigeria to the United States and then make recommendations to cushion its impact on the nation's economy. Mr. Edun, who was speaking at an event organized by the Ministry of Finance, Incorporated, said that while the adverse effect on Nigeria will be through the oil price plunge, the government is intensifying efforts to ramp up oil production and boost non-oil revenues.
This meeting, organized by the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, is bringing together government officials, development institutions, and heads of government, departments, and agencies towards ensuring accountability and transparency through corporate governance. Over the years, corporate governance in Nigeria has evolved using a combination of statutory frameworks and regulatory codes aimed at enhancing corporate accountability and performance. Government officials plan to now take this vision seriously.
There has not been a consistent effort to actually institutionalize performance-based corporate governance in the public sector. And today, this is a very important event. It's very significant because it is laying the foundation for good corporate governance. MOFI is the friendly partner, guide, and host, and assistant in this journey.
We need to ensure that these institutions that are owned by states or are linked to the states have the capacity, have the credibility, and have the ability to go out there and mobilize capital, both domestic and foreign.
At a time when nations across the globe are contending with economic uncertainties, financial vulnerabilities, and the demand for structural reform, the discourse on the corporate governance assumes greater relevance.
For us in the Nigerian power sector, good corporate governance is not a luxury. It's not a nice to have. It is a necessity for national competitiveness, for financial sustainability, and for inclusiveness in our service delivery strategy. And we expect that this forum will serve as a catalyst, not just for dialogue, but for action.
The Minister of Finance then comments on the 14% tariff hike on goods imported from Nigeria to the United States and how the government intends to tackle them.
For the economic management team of Mr. President, and for indeed his whole government, we are going back to the drawing board to look at the scenarios that may play out if the current tariff situation is prolonged. For Nigeria, in terms of exports, it's not too bad because oil, minerals are excluded by America.
After the speeches, the Corporate Governance Code is then launched. The code is to serve as a guide towards ensuring accountability and transparency in all government transactions.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Trade Representative to Nigeria has berated the country for imposing an import ban on 25 different categories, which is impacting American exporters. Coming at a time, tension is rising over the sweeping tariffs imposed on several countries by the U.S. The organization described the import ban by Nigeria as one of the 10 unfair trade practices perpetrated against the U.S. by different nations. The organization said import restrictions placed on items like beef, pork, poultry, fruit juices, medications, and spirits limits the U.S. market access and reduce export opportunities. I want to bring in now Chief Executive Officer of Cowrie Asset Management Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. He joins us now from Lekki in Lagos. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me. Good day.
And good to see you. First off, would you say it is unfair that the United States, unfair on the United States that Nigeria is imposing this import ban on 25 different product categories, if it is true that that is what the federal government has decided to do?
Well, I think the U.S. is just trying to whip up sentiment to support the position of Donald Trump on imposing a 14% tariff on import from Nigeria. There is no justification to compare Nigeria's restriction on importation of things like pork, meat, fruit juice, from not just U.S., from any other country, to the issues around tariff that the United States has imposed across the globe. So every country, particularly for small, weak or emerging economies, they have a compelling need for some level of protection because their industries are not developed, they are not yet competitive. So there must be a support for those industries to grow, to develop, to grow, and for those economies to grow, after which they will be in a better position to trade on even terms with more matured or more advanced economies. So it's given that where economies are still weak, that structures are put in place to stimulate development of that economy, which is why Nigeria had placed a ban on importation of things like pork, meat, vegetable, fruit juice, and the likes. So I think the U.S. is just making an issue to justify the imposition of tariff on imports across the world. So it's just not limited to Nigeria. So I don't think that's just, for me, a make-up excuse.
But do you think that this could harm U.S.-Nigeria trade?
Well, not much. Not much in the first place. If you look at Nigeria's exports of food and food-related items, which is what we basically say to America, other than oil, account for less than 2% of total exports. But if you look at oil is excluded from the list of items that the U.S. is imposing duties on. So which means oil will still flow at the same rate it was going to the U.S. So that will not be affected. If you look at Nigeria's import from the U.S., Nigeria's total import from U.S. account for about 6.36% of the total import. In the last quarter of last year, it was about 1 trillion naira import from the U.S. And these are basically vehicles. And Nigeria is not about increasing the tariff on those items it imports from U.S. So I think on the balance, trade flow between Nigeria and U.S. will remain relatively at the same level with marginal decline because of the tariff that we impose on those food items that we export to the U.S. But also, I want to mention this. Nigerian food items exported to the U.S. are largely consumed by Nigerians in the U.S. who are homesick, who have the palate, their Nigerian palate exported to U.S. and they want to eat our food. So even as the price of those items are going to increase, you will realize that Nigerians in U.S. will still order for vegetable, will still order for the food items that are exported from Nigeria to the U.S. I don't think that it's just that it will erode their purchasing power or affect their savings. But I think average Nigerian who goes to U.S. that maintains their Nigerian palate will still want to eat Nigerian food.
If I know Nigerians, they will maintain the pilots. So the Minister of Trade and Investment had said earlier that much of the impact of the U.S. tariff will be felt in the non-oil sector. You also alluded to that. That's a whole lot of businesses that will be impacted. And I'm looking at, when you talk about the non-oil sector, you're looking at maybe those who do fabrics and, all the likes of them. And then those who also produce food to send to Nigerians abroad.
Yes, those are the major items we export to the U.S. other than oil. Oil accounts for the greater part of what we export, but the other elements of export that are contained in what Nigeria shipped to U.S. are food and food-related items. You mentioned things like textiles. The textiles are basically Nigerians who are wearing homemade and Nigerian-made brocade or apparels, which Nigerians still want to wear over there. And like I said earlier, the same issue of attachment to the Nigerian roots will certainly, to a reasonable extent, neutralize the impact of the increase in the cost of those items. And bear in mind that the tariff that the U.S. is imposing on Nigeria is about 14%. So it then means that the price of these items will increase by 14%. So, and I think average Nigerians in the U.S. will still want to eat their Nigerian food. We still want to wear their aswebi, for their wedding ceremonies. Yes, you might have a marginal decline because prices are going up, but I think it will not be that severe. As long as oil remains excluded. But if you bring in oil, if they decide to impose the same duties on oil import from Nigeria, then the trade between the two countries will be severely affected.
The Minister of Finance did say he was assuring that the National Economic Council will assess the impact of the 14% tariffs. But aren't we already past that, saying that the U.S. is responding to our own seeming retaliation?
Well, I wouldn't know what the Economic Council want to do. We have an average 27% duty on some items coming from the U.S. Most of it, the item that the U.S. Government has picked out in our earlier conversation, for me, are not the relevant issues. The other items we import from the U.S. are largely used vehicles. As long as there's no new duty, because if we impose additional duty on imported used vehicles, certainly it will affect our own economy in terms of, because we don't produce those vehicles. So I don't see Nigeria imposing that. But as it relates to the US duties, I do not imagine that we're going to have any major shift in our trade activities with the US. So whatever the council want to decide on, it certainly not be that they will take out duties on vehicle imports, because doing that will simply mean they're going to take out duties on vehicle imports across the globe, not just US. And if you take out vehicle duties from US, then you have to contend with dumping, because people used to, if you remember, Manachi, that we used to bring all sorts of Tokumba vehicles to the country, including the ones that are complete write-off, which these duties have to some extent constrained us from doing. So I don't know what they're going to end up with. But for me, what we need to do is to look inwards and see how we build a productive economy. We already have a population of over 220 million. So we have a relatively or potentially large consumer market. So if we develop our economy and become a productive economy, and we can sell locally, we have a huge market. If we look at when we used to do the ease of doing business, Global Competitiveness Index, our greatest score was always in the size of the market, but it remains a potential market. So instead of bending backward and say you're going to take out duties on import from the US, I think what we should do is develop a market and then have a robust market that will produce multiple products. In terms of our export, if you look at the countries we export to, the US is not a major export partner today, even though they buy our oil. You have the likes of Netherlands, Spain, and India as our export destination. In terms of imports, you have the likes of China, India, and those two countries from Asia account for more than 40% of our imports. So as a trading partner, US position has lost to some extent its vaulting position as Nigeria's trading partner. That does not mean we will dismiss them, but I don't think the decision would be to bend backward to remove duties on vehicles or to remove duties on items that we have banned from being imported into the country, like pork, like meat, like fruit juice, because we also want to nurture our own local economy. Bear in mind that the US has huge subsidy for agricultural production in their own economy. So if you take out the ban, you're going to have dumping of those products in Nigeria.
Yeah, I'll tell you one country that's not bending, whether backwards or forwards, and that's China, which is preparing its response to the U.S. tariffs, just waiting on Donald Trump to announce the 50% tariffs, and then they will retaliate. Trump thinks it's a bad idea for China to retaliate, and that's because he'll be also negotiating with the South Korean president, who said they're not going China's route. How do you think the U.S.-China standoff will end?
Well, I think however it will end, U.S. will be the worst of. I guess that the reality will hit home. The U.S. government, the Donald Trump government will realize that the folly of taking on the whole world. You don't start a war and take on the whole world. There is no economic model that says a country should pick up warriors across the world. And then China is no longer a pushover that they thought it was or used to be. China is the second largest economy today. China is a major export economy. Like I said earlier, China accounts for more than almost a quarter of our total imports. And that applies to almost every country in Africa. So the African market is there. China is intensively developing the African market. China is exporting to the entire Europe. China is exporting to other Asian countries. So the US trying to force China by saying they will limit Chinese export to the US. China has alternative markets, and China has a comparative production advantage over the US. So US will hurt its economy more than it will hurt the Chinese economy. Of course, Chinese economy will suffer to some extent because I think China's trade surplus against US over 12 trillion dollars. But be that as it may, China has alternative markets, and the US is not a cost-efficient producer today. So the US imposing this tariff on China will mean that a lot of commodities that are consumed in the US will land in the US at exorbitant prices. And the US market will either try to produce those things, and they will not produce at the cost that the Chinese can produce them. So the US citizen will be the worst off for it because they're going to pay for those products at prices that ordinarily are higher than what they should have bought them if they were coming from China. What would that lead to? It will lead to an increase in inflation rate. It will worsen the standard of living of Americans, and it could lead to some level of social dislocation. We are seeing demonstrations across the 50 states of the US, and the impact has not actually hit home. It hasn't hit home run. We've not seen the effect on inflation. We've not seen the effect on erosion of household consumer purchasing power. We've not seen the impact on decline in standard of living, and this will eventually all happen. So I think on a balance, the US, this will affect both countries, no doubt, but the US will be worse off for it.
I've heard, some analysts say that Trump's actions are reminiscent of the same factors that led to the 1929 stock market crash and the recession that followed after. What do you think?
Well, the expectation are there's a study now that people are trying to link the 1929 capital market crash to tariff impositions by the US and global tariff impositions. But I think it's beyond that, but it was a contributory factor. Because when you impose tariffs, you basically vitiate the concept of competitive advantage, where countries produce what they can produce more efficiently and export what they can produce efficiently and import what they cannot produce efficiently. So you are going to see a slowdown. You see a slowdown in trade. A slowdown in trade will lead to a slowdown in manufacturing. A slowdown in manufacturing will lead to a slowdown in employment, a slowdown in household income, and sell-off of assets. And that is a chain of events that this kind of policy decision that Trump has started could lead to. And that's why people are making that analogous comparison and alluding that the 1929 capital market crash or stock market crash was as a result of tariff imposition. I think it goes beyond that, but it may have been a contributory factor or a factor that worsened it. In fact, actually, it was a factor that worsened the situation and contributed to a recession, but it wasn't the fact that what triggered the stock market crash. Stock market crash happened, and duties as part of remedial measures were imposed, and those duties worsened the recovery process.
Right. So you earlier mentioned, what the U.S. Final consumers could expect. What about here in Nigeria? How will the current global economic realities trickle down to everyday people?
Well, a couple of things will happen. We've seen oil price drop as low as $64 per barrel. Bear in mind that our budget was predicated on $75 per barrel. We saw Naira giving within the past few days from about 1,533 to about 1,620 or 30 at the official window. So an increase in exchange rate will lead to an increase in inflation rate, which will weaken household purchasing power and weaken household consumption, and therefore weaken standard of living of average households. That's one aspect. Then at the macro level, we're going to see a decline in our reserve and a decline in our federal government income, which will mean that the federal government has to borrow more if it has to meet its obligations or commitment in the federal government budget, and that will also apply to virtually all arms of government. So if that happens, you're going to see an increase in national debt and an increase in debt service and inability of government to meet some of its budgeted expenditure, particularly those ones that are not discretionary, non-discretionary, those things like capital expenditure budget, which will slow down economic development if the government cannot implement capital budget.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Johnson Chukwu. I always appreciate, your analysis on these issues. And I know that, in the coming days, we'll be looking to you for some more analysis.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to The World Today. We're still here in Nigeria as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has dismissed online rumors that Nigeria is among 14 countries banned from entering Saudi Arabia starting April 13, 2025, insisting that the only official travel guidelines currently in effect relate to the Hajj pilgrimage. The ministry said that the only official restriction applies to holders of tourist visas during the Hajj season, noting that from April 29 to June 11, individuals with tourist visas will not be allowed to enter Makkah or perform the Hajj. In a statement issued on Monday, April 7, the media aide to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Al-Qasim Abdul Qadir, said that the claims being peddled in some quarters are false, adding the Saudi authorities have also confirmed that no such entry bans is in place. Meanwhile, Nigeria's National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, the NDLEA, and Saudi Arabia's General Directorate of Narcotics Control, GDNC, have signed a landmark MOU to strengthen cooperation in combating drug trafficking between both countries. Signed in Riyadh by NDLEA Chairman Brigadier General Buba Marwa, the agreement covers intelligence sharing, joint training, logistics, coordinated investigations, and data exchange on drug traffickers. Mr. Marwa hails the pact as a vital step in tackling global drug challenges, citing previous successes from joint efforts, including major seizures and arrests. While GDNC's Major General Al Karni affirmed Saudi Arabia's commitment to the partnership, marking a new chapter in bilateral narcotics control. The chairman, CEO of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM, Honorable Abike Dabiri-Arewa, has been conferred with another doctorate degree by Smart Island University in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for her humanitarian services and pioneering efforts in diaspora development. Conferring the award, the registrar of the institution, Dr. Mohammed Daidan Al-Mutairi, eulogized the NIDCOM boss on her diligence and relentlessness. He noted the university has almost 90 Nigerian students studying various courses And the intention of the university is to further deepen relations with Nigeria, including setting up a campus in the country. Receiving the honor, Honorable Abike Dabiri-Erewa thanked the institution for conferring her with a doctorate degree and thanked the Association of Nigerians in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for their efforts in mobilizing Nigerians in the kingdom and projecting the good image of the country.
Unexpected here in Saudi Arabia, getting a doctorate degree from one of the best universities here, Smart Island University. Honorary doctorate certificate presented to me. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate this. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Beyond our shores now and away from Saudi Arabia, at least 15 people have died after a roof collapsed at a nightclub in the Dominican Republic. Many more people are injured. Rescue workers are attempting to free people still under the rubble. It's not yet clear what caused the incident, which happened in the early hours of today during a concert by the popular merengue singer Ruby Perez at the Jet Set discotheque in the capital Santo Domingo. The president of the Dominican Republic, Luis Abinader, has expressed his condolences to the families affected. Well, back in Nigeria, the Swedish Crown Princess Victoria has been in the country where she's met with Vice President Kashim Shettima, who pledged Nigeria's commitment to strengthen ties with Sweden. The Vice President described the Crown Princess's visit as opening doors to deeper institutional relations and greater cultural exchange between both countries. Earlier today, the Crown Princess arrived in Lagos for a state visit she says is aimed at strengthening diplomatic and economic ties between the two countries and a commitment to working with the government in technology and other sectors.
The Crown Princess of Sweden, Duchess of Västergötland, Her Royal Highness Victoria Ingrid Alice Desiree, arrives at the presidential wing of the Murtala Mohammed International Airport and was received by the Secretary to the Lagos State Government, Barrister Bimbola Saluhuddin, the Commissioner for Women Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Mrs. Balaji Dada, and other state government officials. It's the first time the Crown Princess of Sweden is visiting Lagos, Nigeria, and she's well entertained by the Lagos State Cultural Troupe. She also danced with the group. From the airport, they proceed to Lagos House Marina to meet with the State Deputy Governor, Kadri Hamzat, and some members of the State Executive Council.
Thank you, sir.
Her Royal Highness, Victoria Ingrid Alice Desiree, says she's happy to be in Lagos to strengthen the relationship ties between the Swedish government and Lagos, Nigeria.
We are very excited to be here and to see what the Swedish-Nigerian relationship can develop into. We see vast areas of potential for further growth and cooperation.
The Deputy Governor, who's representing Governor Sanwo-Olu, appeals for more support in the area of technology and other sectors.
We need a lot of technology. We've been doing a whole lot. We are building fiber optics about 6,800 kilometers across our state. We finished the first phase, about 3,500 kilometers, to increase the bandwidth penetration in our state. And interestingly, a lot of companies are coming. Google is building data center. Data centers are coming. About 4 of them are being built now in Lagos. So increasing their capacity. So for IT and other related infrastructure, Lagos is the place. And with a population of 22 million, about twice the size of Sweden. Exactly. So basically, the opportunity is wide.
Sweden's Minister for Infrastructure and Housing, Andreas Carlson, says there's opportunity for Sweden and Lagos to fully take advantage of green energy and the digital market, which is what brings the Swedish government to Nigeria.
We see opportunities to strengthen the already strong partnership between our two countries, and we see opportunities when it comes to green and digital transition. And yesterday we were in the capital of your Nation in Abuja, and there we discussed and worked with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Honorable Vice President on a letter of intent on green and digital transition. And we see that this can also be a framework for strengthening ties with Lagos.
The Crown Princess of Sweden is expected to inaugurate a Swedish trade office in Lagos before she returns to her home country.
We'll switch gears now to the Middle East, where Israeli airstrikes have killed 58 more Palestinians in Gaza, according to the health ministry there, bringing the death toll now from Israel's genocidal war since October 2023 to 50,810. The ministry also says 213 more people were injured, and they've been transferred to hospitals in the last 24 hours, taking the number of injuries to 115,688 in the Israeli onslaught. Earlier, Gaza's Civil Defense Agency confirmed Israeli overnight strikes killed at least 19 people across the Palestinian territory. Civil Defense spokesperson Mahmoud Bassil said 19 civilians, including several children, were martyred and dozens more wounded in the latest Israeli raids. Thousands of people have rallied in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv to protest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the Israeli PM is in the United States for a visit with Donald Trump. Protesters with Israeli flags marched through streets while chanting and blowing whistles. One of them was seen holding a split image of Netanyahu and the Turkish President Recep Erdogan with the words twins, alongside others calling for the return of the remaining Hamas hostages and for Netanyahu's resignation.
I feel like Netanyahu is slowing things down for his own career. Yeah, the war needs to end. We need the hostages home. And after that, we can take care of Hamas. The government of Netanyahu, I don't trust them. I think they're really bad for the country. I feel like Netanyahu is behaving like a dictator. He's firing, sacking from their job everyone who doesn't agree with him.
Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister has been in the United States with the U.S. President Donald Trump. Both sat for talks in the Oval Office on Monday, and they mentioned commitment to getting all hostages out of Hamas control.
We spoke about not only the hostages, but about Gaza. The hostages obviously is a human story of just unbearable agony. I speak to the families. I spoke to them yesterday. I spoke to another one when I was in Hungary before I came here. I speak to them every day. They're in agony. The hostages are in agony, and we want to get them all out. Steve Witkoff, who's President Trump's very able representative, helped us get a deal that got 25 out. We're working now on another deal that we hope will succeed. And we're committed to getting all the hostages out, but also eliminating the evil tyranny of Hamas in Gaza and enabling the people of Gaza to freely make a choice to go wherever they want. I mean, they should have that choice. And the President put forward a vision, a bold vision, which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable to accepting Palestinians of their free choice if they choose to go there. And I think that's the second thing that we discussed. But the hostages came right on top.
Israeli Prime Minister also hailed Trump's Gaza plan as an incredible piece of real estate.
You know how I feel about the Gaza Strip. I think it's an incredible piece of important real estate, and I think it's something that we would be involved in, but, you know, having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing. Because right now, all it is for years and years, all I hear about is killing and Hamas and problems. And if you take the people, the Palestinians, and move them around to different countries, and you have plenty of countries that will do that, and you really have a freedom a freedom zone. You call it the freedom zone, a free zone, a zone where people aren't going to be killed every day. That's a hell of a place. It's a, you know what I call it, a great location that nobody wants to live in because they really don't. And when they had when they have good living, real living, where Hamas and all of the problems they have, the level of death on the Gaza Strip is just incredible. And I've said it. I don't understand why Israel ever gave it up. Israel owned it. It wasn't this man, so I can say it. He wouldn't have given it up. I know him very well. There's no way. They took oceanfront property and they gave it to people for peace. How did that work out? Not good.
I think what the president talked about is, first of all, to give people a choice. You know, Gazans were closed in. And any other place, including in arenas of battle, I mean, whether it's Ukraine or Syria or any other place, people could leave. Gaza was the only place where they locked them in. We didn't lock them in. They're locked in. And what is wrong with giving people a choice? Now, we've been talking, including over lunch, about some countries, I won't go into them right now, that are saying, you know, if Gazans want to leave, we want to take them in. And I think this is the right thing to do. If you give, you know, it's going to take years to rebuild Gaza. In the meantime, people can have an option. The president has a vision. Countries are responding to that vision. We're working on it. I hope we'll have good news for you.
Now, the U.S. and Iran will be holding direct talks of a possible new nuclear deal on Saturday, according to President Donald Trump. Hours after the surprise announcement, Iran's foreign minister said the talks in Oman would be indirect, but could be as much an opportunity as a test. Trump pulled out the U.S. Of the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers during his first term, said discussions would be at a very high level and that Iran would be in great danger if talks were not successful. Last month, Iran said it was open to the possibility of indirect talks after Trump said he wanted a deal to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons and avert possible U.S. military action. Under-Secretary General for Peace Operations Jean-Pierre Lacroix is highlighting the role of UN peacekeeping and ceasefire monitoring, saying advances in technology offer the ability to extend and increase UN impact and efficient use of resources. Mr. Lacroix told the Security Council of the United Nations that ceasefire monitoring can no longer just be about being present, but about rapidly understanding and acting on what is happening on the ground.
Today's operating environment is increasingly dynamic and often characterized by hybrid threats that blur the boundaries among domains. In this context, ceasefire monitoring can no longer be just about being present. It's about rapidly understanding and acting on what is happening on the ground. Advances in technology now offer us the ability to extend and increase our impact and efficient use of resources by deploying monitoring capabilities far beyond the traditional demilitarized zones. Our digital transformation strategy under the Action for Peacekeeping Plus framework is firmly placed within our strategies and is designed to enhance our missions by providing better tools to detect violations swiftly, coordinate responses effectively, and maintain the trust of the communities they serve. Integrated platforms enable the tracking of ceasefire violation in near real time, while mobile tools facilitate the rapid reporting and verification of incidents.
The monitoring of the cessation of hostilities is a key task in the UNIFIL mandate as described in the Security Council Resolution 1701. This mission is of even bigger importance after the hostilities of October 2023, November 2024. A political process towards a permanent ceasefire should be of the highest priority. The US and French involvement helped to de-escalate hostilities in November 2024. A monitoring mechanism has been established, but this is still a fragile process, and so far, only military-to-military contacts have taken place.
MONUSCO possesses certain surveillance technologies, including
Saying at the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres' spokesperson Stefan Dujarric is alarmed at the continuing Russian bombardment of Ukrainian cities, saying wherever they occur, these attacks must end immediately. He also reiterated the Secretary General's call for a durable ceasefire that fully upholds Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity in line with the UN Charter, international law, and relevant United Nations resolutions.
We are deeply alarmed by the continued Russian bombardment of Ukrainian cities, including the recent strikes in Kharkiv, Kherson, Dnipro, as well as last week's deadly attack in Kryvyi Rih. We recall that directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects is prohibited under international humanitarian law, and any such attacks, wherever they occur, must end immediately. We reiterate the Secretary General's call for a durable ceasefire and our support for meaningful efforts toward a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace that fully upholds Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity in line with the UN Charter, international law, and relevant United Nations resolution. Immediately following the attack in Kryvyi Rih and complementing the efforts of local first responders, we, along with our humanitarian partners, as well as Ukrainian Red Cross, provided first aid and psychological support, and we and our partners also assisted with medical evacuation, delivered emergency surgical supplies to local hospitals, organized hot meals, and distributed other materials.
Away from the United Nations, the 49th edition of the Middle East Energy 2025 has kicked off in Dubai, hosting several companies, including gas engine manufacturers, automotive and heavy vehicle manufacturers, and those specializing in electronics and technologies. Energy products and technology are on display after chairman of the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy, Sheikh Ahmed bin Saeed Al Maktoum, inaugurated the event.
This is our brand Vina engine, and we have been manufacturers for around 20 years. This is our latest gas engine. It's 1.2 kilowatt, and it's our 5th time here in Dubai, and we are meeting our customers here today.
We are so proud to mention that all our products made it in the UAE with the best qualities and best performance. We are the OEM for Birkins engines, Cummins, Lister, Beta, and we are getting all those raw material, and we are building our generators. Our generators got the component from UL, the CE. Our best customer is Saudi Aramco, as example, United Nations. So welcome to Ultimate Power Solution.
A new report from think tank Ember says back in 2024, more than 40% of the world's electricity was generated without burning fossil fuels. But carbon dioxide emissions, which warm the planet, have risen to an all-time high, according to the report, with hot weather pushing up the overall demand for power. And that means an increase in the use of fossil fuel burning power stations. Solar power continues to be the fastest growing energy source, with the amount of electricity it generates doubling in the last 3 years. The managing director of Ember, Phil MacDonald, says amid the noise, it's essential to focus on the real signal. Hotter weather drove the fossil generation increase in 2024, but it's very unlikely to see a similar jump this year. In a separate report, the European Copernicus Climate Service said March 2025 was the second hottest on record, extending a spell a record or near record-breaking temperatures. Right, let's have some fun. In Veracruz, Mexico, a group of 6 young students from the Centro Universitario Latino dos Veracruz have achieved an incredible technological feat after building one of the first piloted drones in the country. Over 3 months, these future engineers dedicated their talent and effort to developing an innovative aerial vehicle aimed at saving lives in emergencies and natural disasters with the guidance from their professors. Their project seeks to provide an accessible and functional alternative for rescues in dangerous conditions. The students focused on not only on the drone's functionality, but also ensuring its design was economical and easy to assemble, allowing it to be replicated by others around the world. We end with a story that might warm your heart. A miracle baby girl has become the first child in the UK to be born to a mother using a donated womb. The baby's mum, 36-year-old Grace Davidson, was born without a functioning uterus and received her sister's womb in 2023, beg your pardon, in what was then the UK's only successful womb transplant. 2 years after that pioneering operation, Grace gave birth to her second child in February. She and her husband, Angus, named their daughter Amy after Grace's sister, who donated her womb. The couple initially wished to remain anonymous, but following the safe arrival of baby Amy, they're now speaking about their little miracle. The surgical team says it carried out 3 further womb transplants using deceased donors since Grace's transplant. They aim to carry out a total of 15 as part of a clinical trial. And we know the mother and baby are doing very well. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi.